Plotinus Third Ennead, First Tractate, On Destiny. Introduction, the question of fate and freedom. Plotinus engages an ancient and deeply human concern. Are we free, or is everything determined? The Stoics had taught that everything unfolds according to divine fate, a rational but unalterable chain of causes. The Gnostics, whom Plotinus previously attacked, saw human life as subject to demonic astral forces. Plotinus, however, seeks a middle path, one that acknowledges cosmic order, yet affirms the soul's autonomy and moral responsibility. The doctrine of fate, hymermene, is not entirely false, but it must be understood within a greater context of providence, intellect, and soul. Fate is real but not supreme. Plotinus begins by affirming that there is indeed a principle that can be called fate, a web of causes and consequences that governs the unfolding of events. But he quickly distinguishes between levels of causality. Providence, pronoia, governs the whole from above through the divine intellect, Nous. Fate, hymermene, is the expression of this order in the realm of time and nature, the unfolding of providence through soul into the material world. Choice, proeresis, belongs to the rational soul, which can align itself with the divine or descend into error. In this scheme, fate is not blind necessity but a rational structuring of events that derives from higher causes. It governs bodies, natural cycles, and the lower part of the soul, but it does not determine the true self, which is rooted in Nous. 2. The world is ordered by intellect through soul. Plotinus reaffirms his hierarchical cosmology. The one overflows into Nous, intellect, which contains all eternal forms. From Nous proceeds soul, which governs the cosmos and produces the world of generation and change. Fate is part of this divine procession. It is the rational necessity by which things unfold in nature. Seasons, generations, illnesses, and physical movements, these belong to the realm of fate and are necessary for the cosmos to be a living, self-consistent whole. But this does not make the world deterministic in a stoic or mechanical sense. Plotinus insists fate is subordinate to soul and soul is free in its contemplation of Nous. Therefore, fate is a servant, not a master. It is an expression of intelligible order, not a tyrant over the soul. 3. Human responsibility. The soul is not ruled by fate. Plotinus fiercely defends the freedom of the rational soul. The true self, the intellective soul, is above the sphere of fate. It may enter the realm of generation, but it is not bound by it. When we make choices, we may be influenced by bodily states, habits, or astrological configurations, but we are not determined by them. The rational soul, when awake, can rise above fate and act according to Nous, which is eternal, unchanging, and free. Thus, Plotinus creates space for virtue, responsibility, and moral development. Evil is not caused by the stars or by some external necessity, but by the soul's own failure to remain true to its divine nature. 4. The stars do not rule us. Plotinus again addresses a theme from previous tractates, the belief that the stars govern fate and thus human lives. He reasserts his opposition to astrological determinism. The stars are signs of the cosmic order, not causes of personal fate. They are part of the grand harmony, reflecting providence. But they do not compel the soul, which is capable of transcending even the celestial sphere. If someone blames their actions on the stars, they deny their own freedom and misunderstand the nature of soul. The higher part of the soul does not descend. It remains always in contact with Nous. Only the lower soul becomes immersed in time, and even then, it retains the power to turn back. Providence, the true power behind fate. Plotinus introduces a crucial distinction between fate and providence. While fate governs the order of temporal events, providence refers to the divine vision from above through which all things are seen as one. Providence is the view of the whole from the level of Nous. It is timeless, unified, and pure. From this vision, soul shapes the cosmos according to intelligible patterns. Fate is merely the shadow of this vision in the realm of time. The philosopher must seek to see the world not as a chain of causes, but as a living unity governed by intellect and flowing from the one. This shift in vision allows us to escape the illusion of fatalism and to embrace the intelligible harmony of all things. 6. Fate is necessary for the cosmos, but not for the sage. Plotinus acknowledges that fate has its place. Without it, the cosmos would fall into chaos. Bodies must be governed by physical law, events must unfold according to rhythms. But for the sage who has risen to the level of Nous, fate is no longer binding. The sage does not oppose fate, but he is not subject to it. He acts from higher knowledge, not from compulsion. His soul is in harmony with providence, not tossed by the currents of necessity. Thus, freedom and order are reconciled. The lower world is shaped by fate, but the soul, through contemplation, can dwell in the timeless clarity of the divine. Conclusion: a liberating metaphysics of destiny. In this tractate, Plotinus offers a powerful and liberating vision of destiny. The world is governed by a rational, intelligible order, not by blind fate. Fate is real, but limited. It governs the realm of bodies, not the essence of soul. Providence is the true source of order, the divine vision in Nous. The soul, especially the rational soul, is free, capable of turning inward, remembering its origin, and living above necessity. Plotinus thus preserves the dignity of the cosmos and the freedom of the soul. There is no need to hate the world or resign oneself to fate. The world is a manifestation of the good, and the soul, if it awakens, can dwell in the eternal present of the divine. Plotinus Third Ennead, Second Tractate. On Providence I. Introduction. The world appears unjust. Is providence real? Plotinus opens by posing the classical objection to providence. If the gods care for the world, why is there injustice, suffering, and disorder? Why do the wicked prosper, and the virtuous suffer? Why are some born into misery, others into wealth? This challenge, raised by Epicureans, Gnostics, and skeptics, calls into question the very coherence of divine governance. Plotinus responds not by denying the existence of evil or by defending every particular event, but by redefining what providence is. Providence, for Plotinus, is not a deity micromanaging events, but the eternal unified vision of the divine intellect, Nous. It is the cause of order, form, and harmony, not through interference, but through emanation and presence. What is providence? A divine vision of the whole. Plotinus roots providence in his standard Neoplatonic hierarchy. The one beyond being, the source of all. Nous, intellect, the realm of forms where all things exist in their perfected archetypes. Soul, the dynamic life of the cosmos which contemplates Nous and generates the world of becoming. Providence, pronoia, is the activity of Nous, contemplating the forms. In this eternal contemplation, all beings are present together, ordered, complete, and harmonious. From this vision flows soul, which projects the world into time. Thus, providence is not a sequence of interventions, but a timeless structure, a divine blueprint of the cosmos. It is beyond time, yet it gives rise to time. It is beyond change, yet it governs change. 2. Providence is not a planner, but a principle. To modern ears, providence may suggest a personal God who watches over individuals, making decisions and performing interventions. Plotinus sharply distinguishes his vision. Providence is not a willful deity crafting events moment by moment. It is the radiance of order that flows from the one, through Nous and into soul. It is intellectual, not temporal, a mode of being, not of acting. The world does not happen because a God chooses this or that, it happens because the intelligible world overflows into manifestation. Things are not governed by divine volition, but by presence. The forms are, and so the world is. This metaphysical model allows Plotinus to reject both atheistic materialism and personal theism, offering a third way. The cosmos is the image of a perfect thought, and what appears random below is structured from above. 3. Why does evil exist in a world governed by providence? Plotinus now turns to the problem of evil, the strongest challenge to providence. His answer follows from his metaphysics. Evil is not a substance or a force. It is privation, a lack of form, a consequence of distance from the one. In the necessary procession from unity to multiplicity, there must be degrees of being. And the lowest degrees are necessarily imperfect. Thus, what we call evil is a byproduct of finitude. It is not willed by the divine, but results from the necessary structure of a cosmos that contains both unity and diversity, perfection and limitation. Even this imperfection plays a role, it is part of the whole. In the full vision of Nous, everything and every event has its proper place. Just as shadows are necessary for visual contrast, so too does apparent disorder contribute to the total harmony. 4. The limits of human vision, why we misunderstand providence. Plotinus emphasizes that human beings do not see the whole. We perceive events in sequence through the lens of individual interest and limited time. As a result, we judge providence from the wrong vantage point. He compares this to someone criticizing a painting by looking only at a corner. If we saw the full picture, the whole cosmos in all its interwoven relations, we would see that everything has its role, its necessity, and even its beauty. This is why philosophy is needed to train the soul to rise above the level of partial appearances and to contemplate the intelligible order behind them. The philosopher does not ask, why do I suffer, but what is the role of this event in the great harmony? On the individual soul's fate, just or arbitrary. Plotinus affirms that souls are not randomly placed into bodies or fates. He argues, anticipating the next tractate, that the soul chooses or deserves its lot based on its prior life, its character, and its own tendencies. The soul's condition in this life reflects a justice embedded in the structure of being, not imposed from without, but arising from the soul's own nature. This is not moralistic punishment, but ontological consequence. What the soul is, it becomes. What it contemplates, it incarnates. Thus, the soul is not victim, but participant in providence. 6. The role of providence in the goodness of the cosmos. Plotinus ends by reaffirming his optimistic cosmology. The universe is not a battlefield of good and evil, it is a living, harmonious whole, with each part playing its necessary role. Even what seems ugly or cruel contributes to the total beauty of the system. Providence ensures that the overall design is good even if some parts are dark when seen in isolation. The wise soul sees the world not as a place of exile but as a stage for return where every event is an opportunity to ascend, to purify, to awaken. Conclusion: Providence as the structure of divine vision. On Providence I, Plotinus elevates the idea of divine governance to its highest philosophical form. Providence is not a reactive deity managing crises, it is the very structure of intellect, the eternal harmony of forms radiating through soul into the cosmos. What appears as disorder is a local distortion of a global order. What appears as evil is a necessary shadow in the light of being. What appears as randomness is the unfolding of meaning too vast for temporal minds to grasp. The challenge, for Plotinus, is to lift the soul out of complaint and into contemplation, to see as Nous sees, and thereby to understand that all things are under providence, and that nothing escapes the good. Plotinus Third Ennead, Third Tractate, on Providence 2. Introduction, Injustice and the Human Soul. Plotinus returns to the emotional root of the problem of providence. Why do virtuous people suffer misfortune? Why are the wise and the innocent afflicted, while the wicked often prosper? These questions are not abstract, they cut to the heart of human anguish and moral doubt. Rather than offer pious reassurance or divine mystery, Plotinus offers a metaphysical anthropology. He explains the soul's condition by examining its nature, origin, and journey. His answer is radical: every soul, prior to birth, chooses or merits its condition. There is no arbitrary fate, only ontological justice enacted across time and space. The soul's descent and responsibility. Plotinus begins by reaffirming the pre-existence of the soul. Before entering the body, the soul dwells in the intelligible realm, contemplating eternal forms. But some souls turn downward, becoming fascinated by the images of things, and thus descend into the realm of nature and generation. This descent is voluntary, though often unconscious. The soul is not cast into the body by an evil power, it is drawn downward by its own tendencies, affections, and desires. It chooses embodiment and chooses its place within the hierarchy of the cosmos. Thus, if a soul finds itself in a difficult or painful life, this is not the result of divine neglect or cruelty. It is the outworking of its own prior choices and nature. 2. Destiny as the mirror of the soul's character. Plotinus explains that the world is finely ordered and each soul is placed where it fits. The soul's character, its habits, desires, and level of development determines its circumstances. A soul that is bold and aggressive may be born into warlike circumstances. A contemplative soul may find itself in a quiet life. A disordered or negligent soul may enter into painful or chaotic situations not as punishment but as a correspondence to its inner state. This doctrine is similar to what later Neoplatonists and even Indian philosophy would call karmic justice. But for Plotinus, it is not about reward and punishment, it is about ontological fitness. What a soul is, that is what it lives. 3. The purpose of suffering, ascent through experience. But Plotinus is not fatalistic. The soul is not locked into its condition. He insists that suffering can awaken the soul, reminding it of its origin and prompting it to turn inward. Misfortune may be the soul's education, not its condemnation. In this sense, the soul's embodied life, even in difficult conditions, can be a school for ascent. The The soul is not meant to remain below but to learn from its experiences and to rise again toward Nous. This gives Plotinus doctrine a profound moral message. We are responsible for our condition, but we are also capable of change. The true question is not, why did this happen to me, but how can I use this to return to myself? 4. What about children and the seemingly innocent? Plotinus acknowledges a common objection. What about those who suffer without apparent cause, especially children? Here he is both bold and uncompromising. Such souls, too, are placed according to prior tendencies. Even children, he suggests, are not blank slates. Their souls carry the marks of their pre-bodily life, and their condition reflects who they are. This may strike modern readers as harsh, but for Plotinus it is an affirmation of justice. Nothing is random, nothing is unjust. Every soul lives in the world it has in some way chosen or prepared for itself. However, he balances this with compassion. Our task is not to blame others for their condition, but to aid the soul's ascent in ourselves and in others. V. Providence and the harmony of the whole. Plotinus now ties the individual soul's condition back to the universal providence he described in the previous tractate. Each soul's placement is part of a greater harmony, a cosmic order in which all beings, high and low, contribute to the whole. Just as in music, dissonance and tension are sometimes necessary to complete the beauty of a symphony, so too are difficult lives and lower beings necessary for the full expression of the cosmos. The divine intellect does not see individuals in isolation but as parts of an eternal pattern. What appears tragic in time may, in the eternal view, be perfectly fitting. The soul, when purified, can come to see this and to accept its role with joy. 6. The soul's power of return. Plotinus closes with hope. The soul is never condemned. Its current condition, however painful or degraded, is not its true nature but a reflection of its current orientation. The soul can always turn inward, remember its source, and ascend again. Providence is not only a cosmic order, it is also a call to return. The soul's journey is not about reward or punishment, but about recognition and awakening. And once the soul remembers the divine, it is already on the path of return. Thus, even fate and misfortune serve the good, they lead the soul back to itself and ultimately to the good beyond all being. Conclusion: justice, freedom, and the soul's journey. On Providence 2, Plotinus weaves together a vision of divine justice, freedom, and hope. Every soul is placed where it belongs, not by accident, but by ontological necessity. Suffering is not meaningless, it reflects the soul's condition and can serve as its awakening. The cosmos is ordered, not chaotic. Even what seems unjust is part of a greater harmony. The soul is free to rise, and providence always supports its ascent, never obstructs it. This is a metaphysics of moral responsibility, but also of grace. The soul is never abandoned, never fated beyond recovery. The divine presence is always near, as Nous above and as the light within the soul. Plotinus Third Ennead, 4th Tractate, on our allotted guardian spirit. Introduction: the daimon as mediator and mirror. Plotinus begins with the ancient Platonic idea found in Plato's Republic and Timaeus that each soul is assigned a guardian spirit or daimon that governs, guides, or reflects its fate. But Plotinus does not portray this daimon as imposed from without. It is not a divine babysitter nor a magical creature. Rather, the daimon is a reflection of the soul's own level of being, a higher intelligence to which the soul is related by affinity, not chance. The soul's character, its orientation, and its pursuits determine which spirit accompanies it and how that spirit influences its destiny. This metaphysical guardian is not a superstition, it is a spiritual principle, a cosmic law by which each being is accompanied by that which matches its inner state. The daimon is not arbitrary, it reflects the soul's nature. Plotinus insists that no soul is randomly assigned a daimon. The soul's essential disposition, whether contemplative or passionate, just or greedy, determines the level of being it inhabits and therefore the guiding intelligence it receives. There is a cosmic hierarchy. The one, the absolute source, beyond all form. Nous, intellect, the realm of divine forms. Soul, descending through degrees, higher soul, rational soul, lower soul. Nature and body, the lowest expressions of being. Every soul exists somewhere within this hierarchy, and its daimon is the next higher being above its current level. The daimon thus represents both the soul's guiding pattern and its potential for ascent. 2. The daimon is both governor and companion. The daimon acts as a kind of internal providence. It governs, not by command, but by resonance. If the soul is aligned with virtue and contemplation, it remains in harmony with its daimon, who leads it upward. But if the soul declines, Becoming irrational, base, or disordered, it falls out of alignment and may attract a lesser guiding presence or live without spiritual guidance altogether. Plotinus likens this process to magnetism, like attracts light. The daimon is not imposed, it is evoked by the soul's condition. Thus, our guardian spirit changes as our soul changes. This is both hopeful and sobering. If we cultivate virtue, we attract a divine presence. If we indulge in vice, we descend into the company of lesser powers. 3. The daimon as the soul's future self. Plotinus presents an astonishing idea. The daimon is not simply a companion, it is a higher version of the soul itself. It represents what the soul could become if it fulfilled its nature. In this way, the daimon is like a spiritual double, an archetype or pattern in Nous that draws the soul upward, calling it to remember and actualize its true form. It is not external to the self, but the self's own higher image. To listen to the daimon is to follow the inner call to unity, to virtue, to the good. To ignore or betray it is to live in contradiction to one's own essence. 4. Socrates and the daimonion. Plotinus brings in the famous case of Socrates, whose daimonion, a divine voice or sign, warned him away from error. Plotinus interprets this as evidence that Socrates lived in close harmony with his daimon. He had cultivated his soul to such a degree that the divine voice within could speak clearly. This is not superstition but a spiritual truth. The more attuned we are to the intelligible realm, the more clearly we receive guidance from the divine within us. Plotinus uses this example to show that the daimon is not fantasy but the real experience of those who live philosophically, who have returned inward and dwell near the source. The daimon and death, the soul's next life. Plotinus teaches that at death, the soul is reunited with its daimon if it has lived in alignment. If the soul has purified itself, it may rise to the level of the daimon and become what it once followed. If not, the soul will fall lower and receive a new guiding presence, one suited to its new condition. This reinforces his doctrine from Providence too. Our choices shape our fate, not just in this life, but across the soul's long journey. Thus, the daimon becomes the symbol of spiritual evolution. The soul is always accompanied by a guide that represents its next step, its higher image. But this guide is called down by the soul's own efforts, not arbitrarily assigned from above. 6. Ethical and spiritual implications. The doctrine of the daimon has clear moral meaning. We are never alone. Our inner life calls down a guiding presence. Our choices attract the quality of spiritual influence we receive. We can ascend or descend in the cosmic order based on our alignment with truth, beauty, and goodness. To follow the daimon is to align with our higher self. To follow divine intellect within. Plotinus' teaching offers a spiritualized version of conscience, destiny, and moral development. The daimon is not fate, it is the measure of what the soul deserves and is becoming. Conclusion: the daimon as the soul's guiding light. On Our Allotted Guardian Spirit, Plotinus offers a vision of human life as embedded in a cosmic order of intelligences where no soul is unguided and where each soul calls forth its own guide through its actions and desires. The daimon is not imposed from without, it arises from the soul's character and station. It is both mirror and model, the soul's higher self and future destiny. It leads not by force but by spiritual affinity, drawing the soul toward its truest form. To recognize the daimon is to realize that life is not random, that each moment is charged with significance, and that the divine is not far, but within, always summoning us to become what we already are in essence. Plotinus' Third Ennead, 5th Tractate, on Love. Introduction: Love as a philosophical and cosmic force. Plotinus begins by aligning himself with Plato's vision in the Symposium, where love is described as a daimonic power, born of penia, poverty, and poros, resource, lacking yet desiring to be fulfilled. But Plotinus elevates this myth into a metaphysical doctrine. Love is not merely an emotional or psychological force, it is the creative tension of the cosmos itself. Everything that exists longs for the good. Every soul is drawn upward by eros. Love, then, is the force of return, the power that binds being to the source of being. It is the erotic fire that burns at the heart of the universe. The birth of love, desire for the beautiful. Plotinus affirms that love arises from beauty. When the soul encounters something beautiful, a face, a form, a soul, a thought, it experiences a stirring, a desire to unite with that beauty, to possess it, to become one with it. But why does beauty move us? Because it reminds the soul of its origin. The soul recognizes, in beauty, the trace of the divine and is drawn toward it. Love is thus the soul's awakening to its memory of the higher realm. This applies not only to physical beauty, but to virtue, intellect, and form. Wherever beauty shines, love follows because the soul, in its essence, is already aligned with the beautiful. 2. The nature of Eros, neither mortal nor divine, but daemonic. Like Plato, Plotinus describes Eros as daemonic, an intermediate being between gods and mortals, between unity and multiplicity. Love is not fully divine, for it lacks, it seeks, it desires. Yet it is not purely human either, it is the soul's longing for the divine, and it flows from the very structure of being. Eros, then, is a mediator. It connects the lower to the higher, the visible to the invisible, the lover to the beloved. It is the dynamic power of participation. Every level of reality has its own form of love. The body loves beauty through sensation. The soul loves beauty through virtue, character, and thought. Nous loves by eternally contemplating itself, the forms. Even the one, though beyond love in the ordinary sense, is the source of all longing, because it is the absolutely desirable, the good itself. 3. Love as creative process, the world born of Eros. Plotinus goes further. Love is not only a response to beauty, it is the cause of beauty. The universe itself was born from divine Eros. The one, in its overflowing perfection, produces Nous. Nous, in contemplating the one, gives rise to soul. Soul, moved by beauty and love, creates the world. Thus, the entire procession of being is an act of love. Each lower principle longs for the higher, and this longing gives rise to life, order, and multiplicity. Creation is not necessity, nor randomness. It is the soul's erotic desire to image the intelligible, to reproduce beauty in time and space. The cosmos is a hymn to the good composed by love. 4. Love in the soul, from body to spirit. For Plotinus, human love mirrors this cosmic movement. He traces the path of erotic ascent. At first, the soul is stirred by bodily beauty, a face, a form. But soon it sees that beauty is not in the body alone, it resides in the soul, in character, intelligence, nobility. The lover ascends from the visible to the invisible, from the image to the form. Eventually, the soul becomes a lover of wisdom, a philosopher, and desires the beautiful itself, eternal, incorporeal, divine. This ascent is not a rejection of love, but its fulfillment. True love is not quenched by possession, it is perfected through vision. The philosopher, Plotinus says, is the true lover because he alone knows what beauty truly is. The madness of love, divine possession. Plotinus acknowledges that love can be overwhelming, a kind of divine madness, mania, as Plato described. But this is not madness in the pejorative sense. It is a disruption of the lower self by the higher, a divine incursion into the soul. The soul in love forgets itself, transcends itself, and is lifted into a state of ecstasy. Ecstasis, a standing outside the self. This madness is not loss of reason, but the soul's encounter with the irrational fullness of beauty. In this way, love becomes a mystical force. It draws the soul into union, not through logic, but through eros, through desire. It is the most powerful form of divine initiation. 6. The goal of love, union with the beautiful itself. Plotinus concludes by pointing toward the highest object of love. Not a beautiful body or soul, not even a form, but beauty itself, which resides in Nous and ultimately flows from the one. To love truly is to be drawn into identity with the form one loves. The lover becomes like the beloved. In contemplating beauty, the soul becomes beautiful. In loving the good, it becomes good. Love transforms the soul into the image of the divine. This is why love is the soul's highest power. It is the engine of return, the fire of remembrance, the wound that heals, and the ache that draws us home. Conclusion: Eros as the soul's ladder to the divine. On love, Plotinus shows that Eros is not merely a human emotion. It is the cosmic desire for the good, the soul's remembrance of beauty, and the force that moves all things to reunite with their source. Love begins in the visible but ends in the invisible. It starts with lack, but leads to fullness. It is born of poverty, but finds its power in resourcefulness. It is the soul's way of saying, I come from the one, and I want to return. For Plotinus, the greatest lovers are not those who possess, but those who contemplate. those who allow beauty to lift the soul until it becomes one with the divine fire that first gave rise to love itself. Plotinus Third Ennead, 6th Tractate, on the impassivity of the unembodied. Introduction. What does it mean to be affected? Plotinus opens by clarifying the central question, can incorporeal beings be affected or suffer changes? We often speak as though the soul feels pain or the gods are moved by love. But if the soul is truly incorporeal, how can it undergo anything? This is not simply a semantic question. For Plotinus, to be affected paschain is to undergo a change in form, a reconfiguration of being, which implies composition, extension, and vulnerability. These are properties of bodies, not of pure souls or intelligences. Therefore, the problem becomes clear. How can anything unembodied be moved or changed if change implies multiplicity and materiality? Incorporeal beings are self-contained and self-active. Plotinus begins by emphasizing that unembodied realities, such as Nous and pure soul, are not composite, not spatial, and not subject to external alteration. They do not receive form from without because they are already fully in act, self-determined, and non-extended. This means that the higher the being, the less it is affected by anything else. The one is beyond being, wholly impassive, never moved. Nous is pure intellection, it contemplates all things eternally without change. Soul, in its purest aspect, remains untouched by the body or sensation. Thus, Plotinus affirms unembodied beings are impassive. They do not suffer, do not change due to what is external because they have no outside, they are entirely within themselves, pure energia. 2. But doesn't the soul feel pain, emotion, or sorrow? At this point, Plotinus anticipates a powerful objection. We clearly experience emotions, pleasures, and pains, and these seem to occur in the soul. Doesn't that mean the soul is passive? Plotinus answers with a crucial distinction. It is not the true soul but the soul entangled in body that undergoes these affections. The soul lowers itself, projects itself into the realm of sensation and becomes identified with the body's movements. In that identification it seems to suffer, but the suffering belongs to the composite, not to the soul in its own nature. The soul, when recollected in itself, remains impassive, intelligible, and self-possessed. 3. The two souls, lower and higher. This leads to Plotinus' famous doctrine of the double life of the soul. On one side, the soul is turned outward, engaged with body, sense, emotion, and temporal flux. On the other, the soul is turned inward and upward, contemplating Nous, rooted in the intelligible. Only the first is subject to affection and disturbance, and even then, not the soul itself, but its imaginative and affective projection. The second remains untouched, abiding in the calm of divine thought. So when the soul suffers, it is because it forgets itself and is dragged into identification with the body. True spiritual practice, then, is not to escape the soul's nature, but to return to it, and thus to recover impassivity, apatheia as a form of divine calm, not numbness. 4. The nature of passion, always tied to division and multiplicity. Plotinus teaches that passion and affection always imply division. There is a subject that suffers. There is a cause that acts upon it. There is a change or movement from one state to another. All this implies time, multiplicity, and relation, which are characteristics of the lower world. The higher world, by contrast, is simple, timeless, and self-present. There, things are what they are eternally. There is no becoming, only being. Therefore, if a being is truly incorporeal, it cannot suffer. It may know, contemplate, or even love, but it does so actively, not passively. Its inner life is a radiation, not a reaction. V. The appearance of passion in the gods or intellect. What then do we make of poetic or mythic language that describes the gods as loving or Nous as thinking? Plotinus explains that such language is analogical, not literal. When Nous thinks, it is not engaged in discursive motion, it is thought. When soul loves, it is not drawn from lack, it expresses desire as the tension of assent, not as suffering. The gods do not suffer, they emanate. They radiate power, beauty, and life. The activity of the higher realm is pure actuality, not response, but creative overflowing. 6. The soul's return to impassivity, a moral and mystical path. Plotinus ends with a practical and spiritual teaching. The soul becomes impassive by turning inward and recovering its true nature. This is not repression, but liberation. By recognizing that emotions, fears, and pleasures arise only when the soul identifies with the lower, the philosopher learns to detach from these false selves. This is not coldness, it is clarity. The impassive soul is not indifferent, but awake, present, and filled with divine light. To reach impassivity is to become truly active, truly free, and truly oneself. It is to inhabit the realm where nothing happens because all things already are in their full perfection. Conclusion, impassivity as the signature of the divine. On the impassivity of the unembodied, Plotinus presents one of the deepest articulations of Neoplatonic metaphysics. To be unembodied is to be whole, self-contained, unchanging. Passion and suffering belong to the realm of mixture, not to pure being. The soul suffers only when it forgets its divine nature and identifies with the body. True philosophy is the art of remembering the soul's impassive core and returning to it. This vision is both metaphysical and moral. Plotinus invites us to see the soul not as vulnerable and reactive, but as a silent flame eternally burning within us, untouched by time and always waiting for the moment when we will return to its stillness. Plotinus Third Ennead, 7th Tractate, on Eternity and Time. Introduction. Why distinguish time and eternity? Plotinus begins by revisiting Plato's teaching. Eternity belongs to the intelligible world, while time belongs to the sensible. But what do these words mean? To answer this, Plotinus explores their ontological roots. Eternity is not just a long time. It is not even infinite time. Eternity is the mode of being of that which never changes, that which always fully is. It is the life of being itself. Time, by contrast, is the expression of soul's motion, a flowing image of what in Nous is simultaneous, whole, and perfect. Understanding this distinction helps the soul locate its true identity, not in time, where all things pass, but in eternity, where all is present. The goal of the philosopher is to move from time into eternity, from becoming into being. What is eternity? The life of divine intellect. Plotinus defines eternity, aion, as the life of the divine intellect, Nous. It is unchanging, it does not move from moment to moment. Complete, it lacks nothing, and it is not on the way to anything. Self-identical, it does not grow, diminish, or differ from itself. Whole in itself, it has no past or future, only an eternal now. Eternity belongs to being, and in Plotinus metaphysics, true being is active, intellectual, and self-contemplating. It is not static, but neither does it become. Its motion is a ceaseless self-relation, a timeless life. This life is not extended in time. It is a pure, simultaneous act, like the perfect, eternal vision that Nous has of the forms. It is the condition of all permanence, the model from which all temporal rhythms derive. 2. What is time? The life of soul in motion. If eternity is the life of being, then time is the life of the soul, especially in its creative and discursive activity. Plotinus explains, the soul, in turning outward from Nous to generate the cosmos, introduces movement, sequence, and change. Time arises from this movement not as a substance or container but as a measure of motion. Time is the image of eternity, but it reflects eternity in flux. It takes what in Nous is present all at once and spreads it out into a before and after. Thus, time is the number of motion in the soul. It is a distension of eternal being. It is the form of the soul's life in the world of generation. Time is not evil or false, but it is a descent. It is the soul's condition when it is no longer in full unity with Nous, when it begins to produce, move, and measure. 3. Time and the cosmos, cycles as expressions of soul. Time manifests itself in the motions of the heavens, days, months, years, seasons. These rhythms are not causes of time, but expressions of the soul's formative power at the cosmic level. Plotinus explains that the celestial motions are the external signs of a deeper, invisible time, the life of the world soul as it governs the cosmos. Thus, astrology misunderstands the issue: the stars do not cause fate. They express the orderly unfolding of time, which itself is the temporal image of eternity's simultaneous plenitude. 4. The soul's two modes of life, eternal and temporal. Like many tractates, this one contains a profound anthropological insight. The soul lives in two worlds. In its higher part, the soul contemplates Nous and thus dwells in eternity. In its lower activity, the soul governs nature, the body, and generation, and thus lives in time. When we live through our senses, opinions, and passions, we live in the flux of time, never the same, always reacting. But when we ascend to contemplation, we return to the eternal now, where truth, beauty, and selfhood are present in their fullness, not anticipated or remembered. This return is not about chronology. It is a change of mode from becoming to being, from time to eternity. The relation between time and eternity, image and source. Plotinus describes time and eternity as analogous to shadow and light, or motion and stillness. Time is the expression, image, or echo of eternity, not identical with it, but pointing back to it. He uses the metaphor of a circle. Eternity is like the center point, motionless, perfect. Time is like the circumference, always turning, but always referring back to the center. This reveals a profound metaphysical truth. Time is not outside eternity, nor is it its opposite. It is dependent on eternity, and its meaning is derived only in reference to its source. 6. Returning to eternity, the soul's final ascent. Plotinus concludes with a vision of liberation. To rise from time is to rise from change, opinion, and mortality. The soul must learn to dwell in eternity, not by rejecting time, but by seeing through it to the eternal pattern it expresses. This means detaching from the temporal self, the narrative self, the anxious self, the self in flux, and recovering the silent presence of the soul that always already exists in the eternal realm. The wise person, the philosopher, is one who lives in time without being bound by it, who acts, speaks, and moves in the world, but whose inner life is rooted in the timeless contemplation of truth. Conclusion. Time as the soul's shadow, eternity as its light. On Eternity and Time, Plotinus reveals time and eternity not as abstractions, but as spiritual conditions. Time is the soul's forgetting, and eternity is its remembrance. Time is the projection of motion, while eternity is the presence of truth. Eternity is the life of Nous, changeless, self-identical, full. Time is the life of soul, dynamic, generative, and fragmented. The philosopher's task is to recover the soul's eternal life, even while dwelling in the movements of time. To live in eternity is not to escape time, but to anchor one's being in what is unchanging even as the world turns. It is to let time serve eternity, as image serves reality, as motion serves rest, as soul serves the One. Plotinus Third Ennead, 8th Tractate, on Nature, Contemplation, and the One. Introduction, The Secret of Generation. Plotinus begins with a deceptively simple question. Why does nature produce forms? Why do trees grow, animals reproduce, the stars move, and the world teem with life? His answer is striking. All things come into being through contemplation, theoria. Nature, soul, and intellect are not separate from the act of seeing. They become what they see, and in seeing, they create. At every level of being, from the highest to the lowest, vision and creation are united. The One does not think, it is beyond thinking, but its sheer presence causes Nous to emerge, filled with the forms. Nous contemplates the One and thus becomes intellect. Soul contemplates Nous and thus generates the world. Even nature, the lowest, most unconscious part of the soul, contemplates, and through the silent contemplation it shapes the physical world. I, the One. Beyond contemplation, yet source of all. Plotinus affirms that the One is beyond thinking, willing, or being. It is absolute unity, pure simplicity, the source of all yet itself unmoved and untouched. The One does not create by will or intention, it simply is, and from its overflowing plenitude arises Nous, the divine intellect. This is not a deliberate act, but a necessary consequence of the One's fullness. Just as the sun does not choose to shine, the One radiates being, and Nous comes into existence as contemplation of the One. Thus, contemplation, which becomes the defining activity of intellect, is born from the silent presence of the One. 2. Nous, the birth of intellect through vision. In Nous, contemplation becomes active self-knowing. Intellect sees the One and, in doing so, also sees itself as its image. It knows itself by looking back to its origin. From this vision arises the forms, the intelligible realities, the archetypes of all that exists. These forms are not separate objects in a mental space, they are the very content of divine thought, and through them, Nous is being itself. Contemplation here is not a passive gaze, but an eternal, living activity. Nous thinks the One by becoming filled with forms, and in this eternal vision it generates soul. 3. Soul, the motion of thought and the birth of the world. The soul, arising from Nous, also contemplates, but now its contemplation has motion. Whereas Nous is still and simultaneous, soul unfolds its vision sequentially through discursive thought and productive imagination. In contemplating Nous, soul creates the world of nature and becoming. The soul produces the cosmos not by choice, but as the natural result of its contemplation of the intelligible world. Plotinus thus reverses the modern notion of productivity as external action. For him, to contemplate is to create. The soul, in seeing forms, projects them into matter, and thus space, time, and motion arise. 4. Nature, the silent thinker at the threshold of matter. The lowest level of soul is nature physis, the formative power that organizes bodies, animates plants and animals, and creates the physical structure of the world. Though nature does not reason, Plotinus insists, nature contemplates. It does not think discursively, but it is attuned to the forms, and from this silent gaze it brings forth life. This is why natural forms, trees, shells, rivers, animals, exhibit intelligible beauty. Nature is not blind or chaotic, but a hidden theoria, a kind of dreamlike vision of the intelligible projected into the visible. Nature is thus the lowest emanation of contemplation, the final image of a chain that begins with the One. Even the earth thinks, not with reason but with formative intuition. All life is contemplative, from stone to God. Plotinus now asserts a grand metaphysical vision, all life is contemplative. There is no division between action and vision. To exist is to be oriented toward the One, and that orientation is contemplative in nature. Even plants gaze silently toward the good by growing toward the sun, flowering with order and harmony. Animals act according to sensed forms, following instinctual patterns shaped by the contemplative power of nature. Humans have the capacity to return consciously to contemplation, to rise from discursive thought to Nous, and eventually to the One. But even the stars, even the patterns of weather and physics, are vestiges of contemplation, echoes of the divine vision from which they emerge. 6. Human contemplation, remembering our true activity. Plotinus concludes by addressing the human soul, you are not a creature of labor or utility. Your true function is not production, but contemplation. Philosophy, for Plotinus, is the recovery of our most fundamental act, not doing, but seeing. The soul does not need to generate new things, it must learn to see what already is. To remember the forms, to recognize the One, and to rest in the activity of thought. This does not mean inactivity, but divine activity, self-relation, vision, joy. In contemplating Nous, the soul is renewed because it returns to its origin. In contemplating the One, the soul is transformed because it returns to what is prior even to being. Conclusion: the world is born of vision. On nature, contemplation, and the One, Plotinus offers a majestic metaphysical picture. The One in its fullness generates Nous, not by will, but by being. Nous, in contemplating the One, becomes filled with forms and gives rise to soul. Soul, in turning to Nous, generates the cosmos, time, space, nature, life. Nature, in its own silent contemplation, forms the visible world, plants, animals, stars, and stones. All creation is an act of vision. The cosmos is not a machine, but a luminous unfolding of contemplation at every level. And for the human soul, the path home is clear. We must stop chasing images and learn to see. In contemplation, we remember that we are not makers but mirrors of the divine, and through vision we become what we see. Plotinus Third Ennead, 9th Tractate, Detached Considerations, Introduction, Philosophy as a Daily Art of Ascent. Plotinus begins not with a grand metaphysical premise, but with the tone of someone reflecting inwardly. This tractate is a collection of thoughts for those who are already on the path, those who seek to remain turned inward, who strive to live in harmony with soul, intellect, and ultimately the good. It is not about constructing a system, it's about maintaining orientation. These fragments are reminders. How to live, how to think, how to avoid falling, and how to ascend. The wisdom here is intimate, not in the sense of emotion, but in the sense of experiential knowledge. Plotinus speaks as one who has dwelt in the higher realm, and urges us to remember what we are. The soul's descent and the lure of the lower. A recurring theme in these reflections is the soul's dangerous attachment to the body. The soul is a divine being, born of Nous, meant to contemplate the eternal. But in entering the body and identifying with it, the soul begins to forget itself. Plotinus warns, the soul does not become evil by entering the body, but by loving the body, by placing its identity in the mutable and thus becoming fragmented, anxious, and vulnerable. What follows is not moralism but a metaphysical truth. When the soul forgets itself, it becomes ruled by external things, pleasure, pain, fear, opinion. This is not the soul's essence but a shadow self. Thus, we must constantly guard against this descent, not by hatred of the body but by refusing to be dominated by it. 2. The ascent through self-knowledge. Plotinus affirms that the soul can always return to itself. The path is through self-knowledge, not in the psychological sense, but in the metaphysical one. To know oneself is not to analyze memories or personality. It is to recognize the soul's divine nature. To know the self is to see the form of soul, and ultimately to become transparent to the light of intellect. This kind of knowledge is not discursive, it is visionary. It happens when the soul is collected, still, and turned inward. Plotinus emphasizes that this is possible now, in this life, for anyone willing to practice detachment, contemplation, and recollection. 3. The illusion of evil and the nature of the lower world. Plotinus repeats a theme from earlier tractates. Evil has no true being. It is the privation or shadow of being, the result of distance from the good. What we call evil arises when the soul is cut off from its source, when it identifies with lack rather than fullness. This misalignment breeds passion, ignorance, and violence. But Plotinus insists, even the lower world has its place in the great order. The soul's task is not to reject creation, but to see through its images and use them as reminders of the intelligible world. Even the lower realities, when rightly understood, point back to their source. 4. The role of the philosopher, not escape, but orientation. The philosopher, for Plotinus, is not someone who merely theorizes, but one who lives from the soul. The true philosopher must detach from the fleeting, resist identification with body and sense, return inward to the soul's higher aspect, contemplate Nous, and through Nous, approach the One. Philosophy is not escape from the world, but the restoration of proper order, body subordinate to soul, soul aligned with intellect, intellect directed toward the good. This requires practice, vigilance, and, above all, love, a longing to become what we are in our truest being. Being is light, ascent as illumination. In one of the most poetic images of this tractate, Plotinus describes the soul's turning inward as a kind of awakening to light. The soul, when caught in the body, is like someone in a cave seeing only shadows. But when it turns, it sees the light that was always there, behind and within. This is not metaphorical for Plotinus, it is ontological. The intelligible realm is light, Nous is a living radiance, the One is the source of all luminosity beyond even vision. To turn inward is not to close off the world, but to rediscover the source of all brightness, not with the eyes, but with the eye of the soul. 6. Final reflection, all beings desire the good. Plotinus concludes with a reminder that all beings, even those that fall, desire the good. No one seeks evil for its own sake. Even in their errors, all creatures are striving for something they believe will fulfill them. This universal longing is the echo of the soul's origin in the One. Even when mistaken, the will aims at unity, happiness, truth. The task of the philosopher is to purify that desire, to guide it back to its true object, not wealth, pleasure, or power, but the good itself, which is beyond being and yet present in all. Conclusion, detached yet devoted reflections on the ascent. In Detached Considerations, Plotinus does not construct a system, he offers meditative fragments, deep insights, spiritual reminders for the soul who already knows, but forgets. The soul is divine, but forgets itself through embodiment. Philosophy is not learning new truths, but remembering old ones. Evil is lack of order, salvation is return to order, body to soul, soul to Nous, Nous to the One. All desire, even in error, is the desire for the good. In these scattered reflections, we glimpse Plotinus not just as metaphysician, but as spiritual master, guiding souls gently with luminous clarity back to their eternal home.